This is Build Your Difference, a podcast created by Blue Artists, a brand platform with one goal: to help great visionaries like you build impressive brands. Every month, we'll bring you insightful tips, knowledge, and compelling stories from successful entrepreneurs and the Blue Artists team on how to create and market a winning brand that does more than just launch a new product or service. It starts an ongoing conversation. Because you're not just making a brand, you're making a difference. Let's start building.
Okay, well, this is actually very exciting because this is the very first episode for our author's journey. So this is part of our Build Your Difference podcast series. And we just wanted to speak with some of our authors that are having their books released, just wanting to learn a little bit more about their journey with the process. Writing a book is something I've wanted to do for what feels like decades now, and I never can get finished with it. I don't know. So maybe after talking to a number of authors like yourself, it'll finally, light the fire underneath. So I thought it'd be a really good idea to have you introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about who you are, what it is that you do, and about the book that you have out now.
Okay. Yes. So my name is Tynisa Merkerson. I am the single mother of three sons, ages 24, 20, and 13. And I also have three granddaughters. I am a minister at Divine Direction Christian Church. And I originally I'm from Chicago, Illinois, but now I reside in Indianapolis, Indiana. And I recently had my book published, Why Do People Say Get Over It? Overcoming Life's Challenges, back in August of 2020.
Okay. And I had a chance to go on to your Facebook page. I saw some videos you had done where you talked, I believe the book has to do with the loss of your mother and brother. Is that right?
Yes, it's actually the loss. So in August of 2017, my mother passed away. And then in May of 2019, my brother passed away. And in January of 2019, my sister passed away. So all passed away about 8-9 months apart, kind of suddenly from each other. Yeah. It wasn't much notice. And it was actually approaching the 1-year anniversary of my mother's death when, I was reaching out for some consoling, and someone told me, get over it. I'm not the only one. And that kind of was inspired and prompted the book, because I was thinking, like, why do people always say that? You hear it quite often. And just because you're not the only one, that doesn't mean that it hurts less. So I just wanted to take the power and just change that to something encouraging and motivating for others who might find their self in a time of loss. And not just grief, but any type of loss, especially with the pandemic happening. You have people losing jobs, you have people losing loved ones, any loss that causes great pain and kind of leave you in a stagnant place.
Yeah. I've experienced that too, where you have a loss, or you want to go through a difficult time, and you're met with some support, but you always seem to be met with that person or persons who want to invalidate your loss.
Yeah.
It's a very common thing. And I wonder, where does that come from? Why are people so quick to invalidate the pain you're going through?
I think people's intentions are well meant, and I would like to think the positive, and maybe think they don't like to see you in that state, so they just want to see you get better. But it's no timeline on healing. You have to allow people to accept the way they feel so they can work through those emotions. So I don't think it always comes from an ill-intended place. No. You have to know the person and try to keep that in mind.
Yeah. I think sometimes, though, a lot of people are afraid of confronting that, whether it's in themselves or they see someone else they know going through that. There's a fear factor there where maybe they don't know what to do or to say. And for them, the quickest way to get over that from their standpoint is to have you get over it,
Yeah.
But it is troubling to have to go through something like you went through, and not have that kind of support you need, where they could say, okay, by all means, take your time to get, to do what you need to do to process this, and in your own time, get over it. If that's even, that we have, sometimes we don't ever actually get over these things, and that's
Right.
normal. I know my dad passed about 4 years ago, and, the very next day I was going to the store, and it was just this surreal feeling where your world has kind of stopped, is frozen in that moment, but
Mhm.
everyone around you is shopping.
Yeah.
And to you, it just feels so, I mean, they didn't know my dad from Adam. So,
Right.
it's all just another day for them, but it just felt so wrong to me. Like, why are you all shopping? Yeah,
Mhm.
it's like you want the community to have a day of, it's just a really surreal feeling. I don't know if you felt that too, when you had to go kind of out in the community through all that.
I have where it hit me the most. I was I believe I had a dentist or a doctor's appointment, and my mother was always my point of contact. So they was like, "Who's your emergency
Mm,
contact?" And I had that frozen moment because, and it had been a little bit of time, like a few months had passed since then. But it's just all the things that come along that you don't know play a significant part in just the who that person is in your life, and just thinking. And especially for me, like my brother and my sister passed, so I'm out here by myself. Who is
yeah.
my emergency contact? And I could not answer the question. And I explained to the lady, and she was empathetic of what I was going through. So
Mhm.
I've definitely had those moments where, oh my goodness, what am I supposed to do? I don't know, So I,
Yeah.
I definitely can relate.
Yeah. And I had that strange moment where, you know, I would go to my bank, uh, you know, quite on a regular basis. And, um, you know, it was rare that the bank teller who knew my family would ask, like I would go in and I would just take care of my business and go out. And it just so happens that that day or two after my dad passed, I had to go to the bank. And just by coincidence, the teller this time asked how my dad was doing,
Mm-hmm.
even though he had just passed, and it's so like in that moment, I didn't kind of know what to say because it's a very personal, private matter. I didn't want to drudge up anything, but it's
Right.
like, you don't want to be rude and like, ignore, so it's like, so it creates kind of awkwardness. And
Yeah.
it's just, so you wanted to write this book to kind of reclaim that power, in response to people who are, kind of rushing you along to get over a tragedy like this. What kind of challenges did you encounter on writing this book? Was it more kind of from simply the writing standpoint, or did you have any emotional challenges in getting this completed?
Um, I think I didn't face many challenges once I committed to doing it. In the beginning, when I first started, when I decided this will be the book, it was kind of a stop and go motion with the writing. But I think that was because when I originally started it, my mother had only passed away at that time.
Mm,
But then I can see now, I always wrote when I was emotional because I wanted the emotion of the book to come through the reader. I didn't just want to sit and just write a book. So now I see that because my brother and sister hadn't passed yet, I guess that's why I was so stop and go. So once they passed along and I just decided to commit to writing a book when I felt those emotions, it was just a smooth process because I knew I didn't want the book to be so grammatically perfect in speech. I wanted to feel
mhm,
like you're speaking to your mother, your sister, your auntie. I wanted it to be real conversational and
mhm,
real relatable because for me, a good book to me is a book I can relate to. So I didn't want it to be with grand words or perfect tenses and sentence structures.
right.
I want it to be like we talk every day. Like
Mhm,
this hurts me and this is why. So I think that was more important to me today, and just making sure that didn't get lost in the editing process.
Did you ever actually encounter any kind of writer's block throughout the writing
I wouldn't
process?
say I encountered writer's block. I just think it was more or less writing when those emotions came through. It's the emotions come here and there. You're never aware when it's going to come. But once I knew the purpose of the book, and I just had to be vulnerable. That might have been my biggest challenge. I was writing a book that I don't know who may see, and they have insight to my life, my raw emotions, and I'm not the most vulnerable person at times. So just letting that guard down and not being too worried what people might say about it. Just know that this book is intended to help people. So if that means I have to let my guards down, then so be it. So because my brother, he actually died of a drug overdose, and he was found outside downtown at a Chicago bus stop. So that's not information you want to readily share with somebody. But however, someone else's family is dealing with drug addictions and things like that. So it's something that needs to be said. So just understanding that, yes, this might not be a good thing, an ideal situation, but still someone needs to hear it. So that was the biggest challenge.
Yeah, it could very well be a catharsis for someone else who's going through the same thing. You mentioned about vulnerability, and that's, certainly with a topic like this, is going to be a lot of vulnerability on the page there. And I'm wondering, because it's such a personal story, for any friends or family, who might say, read the book, was there ever an issue of, having to change people's names? You might have that friend or relative who might get upset because you've mentioned them in a certain way, but you needed to do it for you, right? To tell this story right. Did you run into any of those kind of issues, or was everyone in your community pretty much supportive of it?
I didn't run into an issue where I had to change the names. However, I was concerned. So during this process, I reconnected with my biological father, who I hadn't seen in 38 years. And as an example in the book of just working through things, I had to share my perspective on our relationship. And I didn't want to damage what now we were starting to build and create, but I also want to speak my truth. So I was concerned if he would feel some type of way, or it was family members that I just felt like as time went on, my mother, basically the extended family is all I have left, and they weren't so supportive in the way that I thought they should be. I didn't name specifics, but I did wonder, would those people know who I'm talking about, and would this cause an issue between the family? So far, it hasn't been. I have received support from the family, but I don't know if just the other ones haven't read the book or what, but it was a concern. But I thought it was more important to just speak my truth, because that was my reality of the situation.
I know you talk about one's transformation, right? And having to look within, which I find that's something kind of similar to what we were talking about earlier, how it's very difficult for a lot of people to deal with other people's pain and loss, even their own. It's also very difficult for us to look within, to train, where we have to transform ourselves, change ourselves, and all that. And is that something that you've encountered as well? And why do you think that we are so bad at looking within ourselves?
I think we're bad with looking at ourselves because it forces us to accept the things we might not like about ourselves. It makes us pay attention and take a deeper look inside of ourselves. I feel it's easier to point the finger and blame others, but we can't make anyone else change. We only can change ourselves. So looking within is also a deeper process because you need to get to the root of the pain. What I found that a lot of things that adults struggle with are usually something that stems from their childhood that they may not even be aware of had such an impact on themselves. And that's what I found about my own situation. I was raised in a 2-parent home, we did vacations and things like that. So overall, I thought my childhood was great. But as I became older and I think about relationship choices and things like that, I think the absence of my biological father in my life really impacted my adult life and just dealing with the feelings of abandonment and rejection. But had I not did the search within myself, I would have never came to that conclusion of, oh, okay, these are some things that I need to work on. These things are in me and are causing me to make these decisions. So let me work on these things so I can make better decisions on other things.
Yeah, and I think also, when we're younger, if we happen to recognize any mistakes our parents might make, so for some children, they don't receive enough discipline, and so they're not as structured when they get older, and they don't stay on track and everything. But as we get older, our parents may have made some mistakes, but as we get older, it's on us to correct those mistakes of ourselves. It doesn't do us any good to constantly divert the blame back on our parents. At this age of our lives, we have to take that responsibility. I wonder if, as you were, let me rephrase. Did you find that writing this book helped you to look inward for yourself? Did that happen as you were writing it, or did that inward introspection come after you had finished writing the book?
I think both. I think so. Just shortly prior to my mother passing, I was selected at work to participate in a mind-body medicine training. And in that training, we had to do genograms. And it was at that moment I realized I didn't know much about my father's side of the family. And I hadn't asked up until that point. And I felt so embarrassed by not knowing that information at the age that I was. So that prompted me to ask questions, which I'm glad I did, because who knew she was going to be passing shortly after. So that kind of prompted things and made me put the work in and search in that aspect. And then while I was writing the book, I found it to just be therapeutic to get everything I felt out of me with non-judgment. Because even being a minister, sometimes in the religious setting, people think you should be what I term a perfect Christian. Like, you don't have times where you're mad, you don't have times when you're hurt, when you don't have times to, like, they expect you to be a super Christian. So writing the book was very therapeutic to just be me. I didn't want to be Tynisa the mother. I didn't want to be Tynisa the minister. I just needed a moment where, who am I now? Who am I now that I'm not my mother's daughter or my brother and sister's sister? It was a journey that I had to open up and look into to just figure out my own identity again, because I've been attached to these things in life that are no longer in existence. So it made me realize I have more work to do. And then it also made me think life is not promised. We say that and we hear that, but when you have, my mother, she was well. she found out she was diagnosed with cancer. In less than 30 days, she died. So it was no chemo, no process of the journey. And she's in Chicago, I'm in Indianapolis. So I'm going back and forth between the states just to try to be there for her. But it made me realize too how precious life is. So what do I really want to spend my time doing? Am I really living the purpose that I'm designed to be here for? Am I using every opportunity that I can to uplift and support people that might find themselves in the same situation as me? So it kind of put a new perspective on life for me.
Definitely. I can definitely relate to that. And I believe at the start of our conversation, you said you also work as a minister. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How has the church community's response been in all this? I know for a lot of people that can be a great place to find support when you're going through loss. I know other people who've experienced judgment from their church's community. In terms of at least writing the book, how did the church play into this for you? Or maybe it didn't at all, I don't know.
Overall, the support from the church had been great, been great. I had to be totally transparent. It was moments that I was upset because when my sister stayed in Vegas, so I was traveling a lot when people became sick, because I got the phone call about my sister that she only had 2 weeks left to live. I didn't know her cancer became that aggressive, so I had to go to Vegas and things like that. So people thought that because of everything that was going on, I was running from the church. And it was like, no, I've just been traveling. And I had to, it's once again, just, although I'm pretty sure that this has happened to other people, I'm not unaware of that. However, when it's happening to you, it seems kind of unreal that a person will lose 3 family members within 8-9 months apart from each other. So I had to think people are probably in awe that this is happening too. And once again, understanding they don't mean any harm. But the church, my actual church, they were very supportive. They are still supportive, and it's a good support group for myself. The one lady who told me to get over it, she was a former church member, but I still thank her because she inspired the book. So I can't her. Like, all this forgiven, because had she not said that, who knows if this would even be a conversation right now. So I still thank her too. So the church
That's
community,
a good way to turn a negative into a positive.
Yeah, they have been great.
You had mentioned earlier in the conversation about wanting to speak your truth in writing this book. Was there ever a moment during the writing where you struggled with being honest with yourself? You know, very, very deep and personal topic here. And was it ever a challenge and kind of telling, being able to say to yourself, this is what really happened, this is how I really felt, and rather than putting a spin on it for the sake of you know, how you wanted to tell this life experience. Does that make sense? Yeah,
and it ties back to the vulnerability piece of it. I didn't want to mention that my brother died of a drug overdose. Right. I didn't want to mention that not only one father, but even my stepfather who raised me is no longer in my life and active in my life. And it brought up those feelings of abandonment and rejection. I didn't want to, because people I know was going to be reading the book as well. So I didn't want them to know that I've been challenged with abandonment and rejection issues and things like that. No, I didn't want to put those things in the book. However, in order to help somebody, I had to just keep reminding myself, what is the goal of the book? This is just not you telling your story. I didn't want anyone to feel pity for me, sorry for me. What I wanted people to walk away from reading the book is like, man, she overcame that. I can overcome my situation. Let me start looking at the process. Let me start doing the work. So I knew in order to get that reaction, it caused me to do some things I really didn't want to put in the book. But at the same time, I felt good saying I was angry with you. This made me mad because I don't have the opportunity to pick up the phone and call you and tell you this. But in case you read this book, I want you to know exactly how I felt. So, yeah.
When the book came out, did you find any friends and family began to relate to you differently? If it turned out they read something and learned something about you they maybe didn't know, something very personal, I guess, were there any awkward moments that the book led to?
I wouldn't say it was awkward moments, but I had family and friends say, wow, I didn't know you were going through all that. I didn't know all those things were happening to you. So that just showed the distance it was between the family and friend relationships. There were some that were surprised, and then it was others. I had friends that were really concerned with my mental well-being. They were just like, that was a lot going on. How are you handling all of that by yourself? But for me, and I don't know if it was just the point of writing the book and just so focused on the goal, I didn't feel like I was going through a lot. I miss my family, I still do, and I still have my moments, but I never, and maybe it's just thanks be to God, I never had that moment where I felt like the weight of the world is on my shoulder. Now, of course, yes, I'm sad, I cry at times, and I have those moments, but those were some of the reactions, just concerned over my overall well-being and then surprised that I've experienced those things.
I wanted to ask you about kind of your writing process. So, for example, when did you find it was your best writing time? Would you get up early in the morning and write a few pages here, or was it after you would get home in the evening? How did that work out for you?
I kept a notebook with me at all times. I kept something with me. And whenever an emotion or a thought came, I wrote it down. I didn't necessarily sit down and spend so much time writing, like I'm gonna write an hour today. I didn't so much do that. I just kind of went with the flow of what I was feeling, and that would be good to include in the book, so I would write it down. And I didn't worry too much of putting the book in order. The main thing was for me to get the thought out. I was just writing everything I was feeling, everything I was experiencing. I did do an outline of what I wanted the chapters to be, because it's not listed. I knew I didn't want chapter 1, chapter 2. It was more like vulnerability, anger. Those were significant to me because I really wanted the reader to tap into those emotions. I knew I wanted to include reflection questions because I could write the story, but I need you to write your story too. So after each chapter section, it was a reflection question to just tap into whatever you were feeling at that moment. So as you read the book, as you're finishing my book, your story should be beginning, because it's opportunities for you to write down what you're feeling in that moment when you just read that chapter. And that was more the structure that was important to me. And once I did that, I just wrote it down. And once I got all the thoughts out, then I went back to like put them in order, cross out what didn't need to be there, and made it more structured and more uniform.
One of the challenges I've always faced, and this is what stopped me from ever writing a complete book, is I'll start thinking of the ideas and I'll start to write something. Maybe I get 1 or 2 or so chapters of draft material, but my imagination is playing so much faster than I can keep up with in the writing part. And so my head is already on chapter 15 when I've not even finished writing chapter 2 or 3, and I just get overwhelmed and exhausted by it. Because by the time my writing catches up to what my imagination is doing, I've either forgotten all these plot points or narrative detail, or I've just gotten so bored with the topic or the story that I'm like, I'm moving on. This is of course more of a very personal, experience you had. So rather than in a story one writes, but did you ever encounter that problem where to keep yourself on track, like maybe there was an aspect of the experience that you were looking forward to writing about, and it's in your head, but you're still writing, a chapter on vulnerability. You haven't gotten to anger yet. Is it hard to kind of keep that on a steady track?
For me, if that thought was the strongest thought in my head, I wrote it down. I can always go back to vulnerability. Obviously, my mind is not on vulnerability right now, so let's put that to the side. And I'm gonna go with this thought, because this I don't want to lose that, because if I tend to focus just, okay, this is the first chapter, this is what I'm gonna write about, I too get bored. It would be such a struggle for me, and I would be like, now what am I saying about this now? But when it's strong, I feel like that's something that I want to write about. That's something I want to say. And it's easier to go back for me and add something to something maybe I wasn't so fluid in writing it, as opposed to me remembering something that was really strong that I felt was good, but just because I wasn't there yet, I didn't write it down. So that's back to just write it down. At the end, you can always organize. You can always, and the beauty of technology now, we can cut, we can paste, we can switch it all the way around and make it make sense. The main thing is, if you're on chapter 1 and your mind is on chapter 20, just write it down. It's nothing, you're in control of it. So if once you get to chapter 20, you don't want to keep any of it, hey, we can delete. And so it was important to me not to put the pressure on myself. I wanted this to also be a good experience. I didn't want it to be stressed out for me of trying to complete this book and write this book and things. I wanted to so if you need time to just step away or identify this is my best writing time, you have to find those strategies, I think, that works best with you. If you know your mind wanders most at night, but it also depends on what type of book you're writing too, because if you're writing just a natural story, you might need your mind to wander sometimes. You might need to watch something or listen to something to provide that inspiration to just make the thoughts come.
Yeah, definitely. So basically, your focus would be on writing something when you're inspired, even if it's just a short little fragment, and then you might get inspired to write here and something over here, and then you bring them together later on down the line.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Because actually, this wasn't, when I knew I wanted to write a book, this was not the first book I thought I was going to write. I wanted to write a book on raising sons. Then I wanted to write a book on being single. And I attempted to write both of those books, but the thought process just wasn't there. I had written a little bit and then I was like, oh, I don't like that. I kind of come back. But once this book came about, this idea, this was one I could see through completion. Now, I might go back eventually and write those other books, but just not, for me, I just wasn't forcing anything. I didn't want it to feel forced. I didn't want to feel stressed. So sometimes I feel like you might try a couple of things before you get to that thing, and that's okay too, So it's dependent on what you want to do. Like, I think a main thing would be, why do I even want to write this book? and what do I want the book to say? And I think if you can answer those questions for yourselves, when you get off track, those can be your reminders. I'm writing this book because, and I want this to say this because, and who do you want to read the book? And those are the little questions that kind of wheel you back in when you find yourself drifting.
Makes sense. These next couple of questions, we've sort of kind of touched on this already, but for those of us like myself, hopefully one day, who hope to write a book or just get into writing in general, from your experience, what is the best way to get started? Like, what should we be doing? So we've never written before. We've got these ideas. How do we get started?
Well, what I suggest is just like the questions I just mentioned. First, determine why do you want to write this book? Because that really aids in you completing the project, whatever it is. Mm-hmm. Who do you want to write the book? That way, while you're writing, you're thinking about that person that's reading the book. If you are a reader, think about some of the things that you like reading when you read a book. Not to say you would imitate it exactly, but what do I like? Do I like when it's very descriptive? Do I like when it's big words? Do I like when it's conversational? Think about the grammar and the text and the emotions that you enjoy while reading a book, and then you kind of can use those as guidelines to incorporate as you write the book. And then make it fun. If this is a project, we always do things better when we enjoy doing them. So just, and don't be hard on yourself. Oh, I messed up on that, or that doesn't sound right. That's okay. I think sometimes when we want to complete these projects and we're so passionate about it, we can be very hard on ourselves. So just be confident in, I'm doing something I've never done before. So it's not going to be perfect, and that's okay. I'm learning. I've never done this before, and this is the first time, but once it's done, I know I'm going to be excited about it. I know people are going to love to read it. So just keeping those little tidbits in mind and just enjoy what you're doing.
I wanted to ask you, for those persons who go on to read your book, they've read through it and they finished it, they set it down. What is the primary thing that you would hope they take away from the book?
The main thing I would hope they take away from the book, one, I want them to feel a community of support. Even if we never talk to each other, I want them to feel like someone understands what they're going through, because sometimes we just want someone to understand. We're not necessarily looking for help. We want a listening ear. So I definitely want them to feel like they have somebody who understands what they've been through. I also want them to take away that it is hope. No matter what, it is hope. It might be a process. And I want them to take away that it's okay not to be okay. I think we live in a world today where we just put on these facades like, how are you doing? Oh, I'm fine. No, you're not fine. We say it so casually that we don't even take the time for someone to answer when we ask the question, oh, how are you doing? And we keep walking past. So I want them to take away, it's okay not to be okay. And I want them to say, man, I read this book. Maybe I can try these activities. Let me do this process and see how it works for me. Or maybe let me see if I can go to counseling and talk to someone to get to the root of my problem. And some of the feedback that I've had has been really great. Like one example, someone who read the book, she said that she was able to go to counseling and she found out she had this need to always be perfect. Now, my book is on grief and loss and death. But from reading that, she found out that she had something inside of her to make her want to always be perfect and do things right that she needed to tap into. So that was a good example of it's not just about grief and loss. It can speak to more than one situation. So those are the main things that I want people to take away. In the book, I say you have to accept the things that have happened to you. Mm-hmm. And with acceptance, we have to understand that you don't have to agree with something to accept it. This has happened. This is how I feel about it, whether it was good or bad. You have to use forgiveness. Whether it was another party involved, you have to forgive them and forgive yourself. Sometimes we are so hard on ourselves. I had to work on forgiving me, just making, I shouldn't have did this and that. Okay, it's done. Forgive yourself and move on. And then just pursue better. These things are happen, whether they were in my control or out of my control, but I'm going to pursue better. I'm going to pursue happiness. I'm going to pursue joy. I'm going to pursue anything that puts me in a better place, and understanding this does not happen overnight. It is a process. You will have your highs and you will have your lows, and that's okay. Just continue to put the work in.
Yeah, it's interesting you talked about forgiveness, because that's a very interesting thing in that in a lot of cases, forgiveness is more something that you need to do for yourself. Like, so you've been through a difficult time or you feel someone's wronged you, we tend to think of forgiveness as that person should ask for forgiveness. But I think sometimes really the forgiveness is something that you need for yourself, because you can sit there and stew about what this person may have done to you while they're off, maybe even totally unaware that you're upset with them. They're living their life, they're having a great time. And I think forgiveness is really about you coming to terms with it and you letting go of it, so you can get on and do what they're doing. They're having a good time, so you need to have a good time.
Yes, I totally agree with that. And that has happened to me too, where I've been so upset with somebody, and then I see them, they're smiling and happy, and I'm at home mad. And I was like, wait a minute, something's not right about this situation.
Yeah. And half the time they're not even aware that you're upset with them.
Yeah.
And you're just going to go home and like just pound the pillows so those feathers come out and everything, It's, so, let's see. Two questions here. One is, for those interested who are watching or listening to this, for those who would like to read your book, where can they find it? Is it on Amazon? Is it on Audible for any ebook?
It's you can purchase it at Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com, or directly from my website, which is TynisaMerkerson.com. That's TYNISA.Merkerson, MERKERSON.com.
Excellent. And any particular projects you have in the works, any books you might be looking to write coming up here, or is this going to be kind of a one and done?
Yeah, I'm actually in the process of getting ready to start my second book, which is It's Okay to Leave. And the subject matter is about domestic violence. So that's the next project. I think I want to always come from a personal experience of what I've been through, but also provide a way of hope for people. So that's the next project I'll be working on. Okay, and I just wanted to mention this too, because I didn't mention it earlier when you talked about the process of writing a book. Another reason why it seems to be so seamless, and I'm going to do a shameless plug, Blue Artists had been great. Like, they were very professional. They met their deadlines. They were very courteous. So it took really, I only had to write the book. And I feel like they have done everything else for me, just with the editing. Even if I took too long to respond, hey, we sent you this, we need a response back. So I think that the publishing piece of it and the editing piece of it, that's where I think it can get overwhelming for people. So I do want to suggest, if anyone is looking for an editor publishing company, I would definitely recommend Blue Artists because they were great. And they even did my website too. So definitely.
Yeah. So they were able to take care of that for you. So you, in a way, you didn't really have to lift a finger then.
Exactly. Yeah.
Oh,
I just had to agree or not agree with the comments. And if it was something they still didn't understand, and if I didn't agree with the comments, it wasn't like, well, we really think you should do this or that. Like, it was like, okay, I understand, but help me understand a little better so I could be on the same thought process with you. They did a press release for me. So it was beyond, I can't speak enough. So I think that was part of where it hasn't been a real challenge for me.
Excellent. And so the process there, would you write some of the book and share that with them? Or did you have the whole manuscript done up yourself before you went to Blue Artists? Was it like a piece by piece along?
Yeah, I spoke with one of the staff members at Blue Artists prior to submitting the book. I was still in the process of writing it. We discussed what's the plan of the book, the objective, and the best course of action of how many pages I needed to be, and so I could stay on that track. So I knew going in what my page limit had to be. And then once I completed the book, then I sent it to them with a complete manuscript. And then that's when the editing process, it was a 3-month process when I went through it. It was a 3-month process, and it was 3 months, like very, very on time. They did the cover of the book, everything. So
excellent. That's fantastic. I think that's going to do it for us. Tynisa, thank you so much. I've really enjoyed this.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, you're very welcome. And we will.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Build Your Difference. If you'd like to learn more about how Blue Artists can help you develop a distinguished brand that inspires and engages a growing audience, then please visit us at www.blue-artist.com and be sure and subscribe to our monthly podcast for the latest tips and trends in brand development and marketing. And remember, you're not just making a brand, you're making a difference. Start building yours today.